Well, good morning, and thank you for being here. This is a very exciting time for us here at Georgia Tech. Very exciting time for the innovation ecosystem that exists here in Atlanta, and in particular in Tech Square. Our goal here is to try to have a panel discussion with individuals from a whole host of backgrounds to try to understand the perspectives around innovation ecosystems. When you look at Technology Square, actually groundbreaking in 2003, so it's not very old, 13 years old. The first innovation center was actually Panasonic and opened about 4.5 years ago. And when you look at the progress that's been made and the number of innovation centers that exist here in the Synergy building, and the number of innovation centers that exist elsewhere in and around Tech Square, it seems like at least once a month we have a new company that comes in. Just recently, Honeywell and Emerson both announced innovation centers here at Technology Square, so very, very exciting. But we're pleased to have a panel here. Jim Bonet, who's the director of the Advanced Technology Development Center, an agency within the Enterprise Innovation Institute, is going to serve as the moderator. But I want to welcome all of you here this afternoon, and I'll turn it over to you, Jeff.
Thank you. Thank you, President Peterson. Thank you to our panelists, and thank you all for being here. I am delighted to moderate. I'd like to highlight for everyone that I will not be introducing the panelists, that you have their bios in front of you, and they're clearly identified by name tags. Panels in front of them. I would also like to ask everyone to please silence your phone if you haven't already done so. We will be recording this, so we don't want any fancy ringtones going off in the middle of our questions. And I would like to also remind the panelists that this conversation is on the record, and our friends from the media that they are welcome to record this if they would like to do so. Also, I'd like to make sure that this is more of a conversation than a panel, so feel free to join in at any given time, ask questions and commentaries. But I will start off with the first question. So the first question, Tech Square has become a destination for corporate research centers. We're seeing similar trends in cities like Boston and Pittsburgh, where corporations are putting innovation centers in urban areas next to research institutes. The question here is, what is the strategy behind this? And President Peterson, I'd like to start with you.
Well, as I mentioned, Technology Square was really started 13 years ago to try to allow two principal things to happen. First of all, we are space limited on the other side of the connector, and we needed access to some additional space. Home Park is on kind of the north side on 10th Street. We've got Coca-Cola and North Avenue on the south side. On the west, Marietta and the railroad tracks, which make it very difficult to expand across the railroad tracks. And so the decision was made to jump the connector and come to this side. And that was a deliberate attempt to try to make a better connection with the business community. I know that there was some discussion and some thought about expanding the innovation and entrepreneurship initiatives. I'm not sure that the people that envisioned Tech Square envisioned exactly what it is today, and it's grown a little bit organically, and we've seen these innovation centers come. We did a strategic plan to try to understand what are the advantages that we have here in Atlanta that Georgia Tech has that we could build on, and the number of Fortune 500 companies was one of the large ones, a significant number of Fortune 500 companies. And so we started talking about how we could connect with them. And as I mentioned in my opening remarks, Panasonic opened an innovation center, and then a number of companies followed suit. So I think the strategy is to try to provide an opportunity for large corporations to create an innovation space and access the talent and the technologies that exist here at Georgia Tech. You can ask the other panelists if it's working.
A logical next step would be Mr. Gelhardt as an early adopter, as you would say, for opening an innovation center here in Tech Square. What was your strategy behind that?
Yeah, I think it was pretty self-evident because we're traditionally in automotive space. And if you know anything about automotive, the speed and the time to market is not really in line with tech. So we needed to find a way to bridge that. So we spent a lot of time with our people in Detroit and other locations, but we needed something that was the offset to that, that moved at the speed of tech, but still had a little bit of a tie back. And this gave us a tie back to really the new mobility space, gave us access to university assets and university talent in a demographic that we wouldn't have found otherwise, and that we didn't even have in our traditional base in Detroit. Because the people in Detroit have a kind of a predisposed notion to what mobility might be, and this space allowed us a number of different things, including that aspect of urbanization. It's a real critical point of that going forward.
Thank you. Mr. Miller, you've opened one of the most recent innovation centers. What was your strategy?
Yeah, I would agree. I think it has to do with the speed of change. And technology and talent are driving that pace. And so we wanted to get close to where, a university, which is really the hotbed of both of those things, talent and technology, could then bring, where we could tap into that hotbed and bring that to our business. Atlanta also happens to be, in Georgia in general, kind of the epicenter of healthcare technology for the country. There's a lot of activity in healthcare technology here. And so when you put all that together, along with several other Fortune 100 companies that are kind of in the ecosystem, you've just got a great environment to drive your own agendas forward. Yeah.
Excellent, thank you. For years, innovation has been done in isolation, typically in internal R&D. Right? Today it's fairly well acknowledged that innovation cannot all be done in-house. Right? So what is driving the idea that to innovate we must collaborate, and how do these external innovation centers work with or complement the internal R&D? And Mr. Wren, since you're working with numerous divisions of Georgia Tech, I3L, as well as having an innovation center here, maybe you could touch on that.
Yeah, so I think one of the key things for UCB is we believe in networks, number one. And so we have a strong R&D platform. In fact, we invest almost as much as anyone in R&D, about 30% of our revenues almost in research and development. But the ability to be networked and assure patient value means we have to go beyond our own walls. And we really believe that being networked is the way to make this happen. And if you think about healthcare in general, whether it's an insurer, whether it's a physician, whether it's a hospital, whether it's a pharmaceutical company, we need to see transformation, but no single entity can create that transformation on their own. So if we want to see this transformation take place, we have to be networked, and that's one of the reasons that we're here.
Thanks. Any other thoughts on that?
Yeah, I have a quick thought. I think we're in an era, we came through a marketing era of experiential marketing, but we're almost in an era now of experiential innovation, where you have to experience some of what's happening rather than being able to do it, as you said, in a sterile lab. It's virtually impossible to understand all of these aspects at speed of innovation unless you're actually experiencing it or have a user interface that you can actually draw or tap on. So I think we're past the era where you can do it in a dark room. You actually have to do it with partners and through end users that can actually draw immediate feedback. And I think that's one of the things this gives us in an ecosystem that's highly interactive.
So maybe I'd make another comment here. I didn't really get it, these innovation centers. I really didn't understand them until there was this kind of aha moment. We had several innovation centers that were here, and Ralph De La Vega was talking about opening a new foundry with AT&T Mobility, and he came and he and about 4 or 5 of his leadership team through kind of what we were doing in ATDC and what was happening here in Technology Square. And at the end of the afternoon, about 3 or 4 hour session, he said, "Okay, bud, we want to have a center here, an innovation center here. They call it a foundry. We want to be here. Where's some space?" And I said, "Well, the Archdiocese down the street, about 5 blocks down the street, I think has some space to lease. And the good thing is it's right next to the AT&T tower." And he said, "Well, 2 problems. One, it's too far away. And number 2, the last place I want to put an innovation center is in the shadow of our corporate headquarters." And I kind of went, "Oh, yeah, I think I get it." But I think the idea that you can have a group of people out that can think freely and be exposed to a lot of these different ideas. One of the things that another thing that surprised me, I guess, was how the innovation centers have now started to interact with each other. And we're seeing they're not just interacting with Georgia Tech, with our faculty, staff, and students, they're interacting with each other, which I hope is giving some positive benefits.
Excellent. And I spend a lot of time personally thinking about how do I, as general manager of ATDC, and our companies interact with, our startup companies interact with the innovation centers. So my next question is along those lines. Like, what can we do to further foster support, mentorship between established corporations and startups? And how do you promote an environment within your own corporations, large corporations, where to have an interest in whether or not these startups succeed or fail? So I'm going to actually, as Blake is the former entrepreneur and investor in the room, we'll start off with you.
Yeah, well, a good place to start is to look at that synergistic relationship between big companies and startups that you see in existing leading tech hubs like Silicon Valley. You know, it's kind of in the DNA of big technology companies located there to be early customers, to be sources of talent, to acquire these companies. And that, you know, that essentially creates this perpetual innovation machine, right? This opportunity for these early stage companies to interact with those big companies, and they've been doing that, you know, since the days of HP and now with Google and Facebook and everything else. So now what we're seeing with everything that we've been talking about with big companies, right, is that it's not just technology companies now, right? Everyone's kind of embracing this open innovation concept. So we have the opportunity to do that, you know, on a much broader scale. And you know, platforms like ATDC and accelerators and things like that are great opportunities for these companies to engage with the startups and join, you know, mentorship programs and provide access. What the startups really need is access to those markets, and that's what the big companies have. So, you know, these organizations that already have an infrastructure for connecting with those startups are great platforms for that. And you know, we joke with I joke with folks that angel investors will come to me all the time and say, hey, how do I get involved with startups? I want to mentor, or I want to invest, or whatever else. And I joke and say, you know, just write a check, right? And so I think that's kind of what you're seeing with the corporations and these corporate innovation centers too, right? They're getting out there, but they're also investing, you know, and that investment is benefiting the startups, right? Whether it's just, you know, investing by being a customer, or investing by being a partner, or literally investing in the startups to help them succeed. And so all of that together, you know, all of this activity is really the big change and the big opportunity. And so, as an investor in the startups, you know, that's what I'm most excited about. And I think, you know, it's not just an opportunity for the startups, it's an opportunity for the companies, it's a leadership development opportunities for those executives to get involved in that mentoring. So all of that combined, just tons of opportunity.
Yeah, I was going to say, there's also to a certain extent no choice. And I think that's fantastic because as we look at disruptive game changers, they're coming from startups. And whether you think of Airbnb or you think of Uber, if you really want to be involved with game changers, it's the startup world now. So I think we have to change our perspective, right? Because startups used to sort of define small entities that maybe would contribute to a larger entity. But now the startups are changing the landscape in which we live. And I think it's just a necessity.
Yes.
I'd like to add one comment too. You know, large corporations aren't good at dealing with small companies, typically. We either want to buy them, crush them, beat them, acquire them, do something, but we just don't know how to be nimble enough to work with small companies. And through these innovation, I'll call them ecosystems, it really is all about collaboration. It creates a safe zone for startups to be able to talk to big corporations, get access to the big machinery that works behind these Fortune 100 companies. And likewise for large corporations to create a safe zone to work with startups and have serious dialogue about, you know, potentially game-changing capabilities that have some, I call it fresh oxygen to operate in.
Excellent, thank you. Changing tones a little bit. There's a different energy level on college campuses. You know, it's a different energy level in Tech Square. You can feel it. It vibrates when you walk out the door of this building. So, you know, my question is, how does this kind of college campus atmosphere, this vibrancy, affect both the work and culture that are going on within your innovation centers?
I'll take a shot. I won't answer the question. I'll just make an observation. Traveled as Silicon Valley to Microsoft and Google and a lot of those types of companies. And I was sitting, and I can't remember which one it was, but I was sitting and watching what was happening. It was lunchtime, around lunchtime. We actually were eating lunch. And there's a volleyball court over here with people playing volleyball, and there's a dinosaur statue over here, and there's all, and I think what happened is a lot of those companies, Facebook, Microsoft, Apple, have co-opted the university model. These companies have created a work environment that's like an extension of a college campus. There's food everywhere, there's volleyball courts, skateboards, and bicycles. And it just amazed. I was just sitting there watching this and observing. I thought, this is really neat. They've taken our model and extended it to their businesses, and it's been hugely successful. They're working 24/7. And it's just a lot of freedom, and I thought that was kind of, maybe other people have realized this long before I did.
I think Jeff made a comment about there is no choice. In our space, it's about the connected vehicle and that whole idea of mobility. And there's no generation that's more connected than the current generation. So it's essential for us to have that resource really tapped and then try to balance that with what our existing knowledge is. So this winds up having that effect as kind of a unintended real consequence of why we're here. But it really gives us access to the core generation that is going to change the things that we have to adapt to.
Excellent. And then how does that new culture, new way of work, does that make it back into the parent organization? And what does that look like as that starts to evolve?
We have a long ways to go, but we're trying. And one thing I think we have to consider, if we want to attract and maintain the best talent in the world, it's very difficult to see an environment like Georgia Tech or go to Silicon Valley in the traditional corporate environment. Does that really attract and maintain the best talent? And so we have a long ways to go, but it's critical, especially for the younger generation. And if we want to be competing with the Googles of the world, the Apples of the world, we have to transform internally as well, because people don't want to make that leap from this very innovative, energetic college campus feel to a stoic sort of cold feel. And so it's a talent question as well, attracting and maintaining the best talent.
In our company, and I think a lot of companies, there's this belief that innovation is everybody's responsibility. And the consequence of that is maybe no one's actually leading the charge, because we all just assume, yeah, we're all innovative. What's happened at Anthem with the opening of our Innovation Center here at Tech Square is there's a new hope across the whole company. I mean, we're a large Fortune 50 company, and we know the healthcare industry is being transformed. It's undergoing the same kind of transformation many industries have. And as a large company, you wonder if you're going to be a part of it or if it's going to happen to you. And I'll tell you, the energy level in the company, the hope factor, that we now have a place to vet ideas. We use a collaboration tool, a crowdsourcing tool to pull ideas together and then bring those ideas through the innovation funnel, as we all know. And one of our colleagues said, for the first time in years, if you have a great idea, you have somewhere to take it instead of chatting with your friend, at the bar about it. You actually have a real place to bring an idea and hopefully get it vetted through to a pilot and a real capability.
Thank you. At this point, I'd love to open it for questions from our friends from media. So.
I was wondering if either of you could give an example of a product or solution that came out of collaboration with Georgia Tech.
I would be happy to, just quickly. We'd like to welcome our members that sign up for healthcare, and we used to use kind of a generic video to just broadly welcome any member into our environment. One of the things, in fact, it was the first innovation here. We created what's called a dynamic video, and so what we're doing is taking real data from the member that signed up and real data from the plan that they've signed up for. And at the moment the member clicks on a button, the video is dynamically generated to bring together all the attributes of their family, their situation, and their plan benefits to tell them exactly what they've signed up for. So that's a kind of a raw capability that has its first use case in a welcome video, but has potential other use cases as well.
So early days for us, and we're new. In fact, we have a team meeting today. It's our very first day on campus, right? So it's very early. But one of the things that we're working with the VA and Georgia Tech on, and we hope to see this product come to life, is a project we call Illuminate, which is a predictive analytics project. And what we really want to do is unlock the right match, the right medicine to the right patient. And if we go into this predictive analytics platform, if you think of study designs in the US with the FDA, you sort of deal with the averages. But on this curve, you have on both sides people that don't respond or respond in a way that they shouldn't respond. So if we're able to unlock this match with the predictive analytics platform, we'll save a ton of money. We'll know that you as a patient received the right product, and we're just getting started here. But it's one of our key initiatives with Georgia Tech.
How many university members are you working with on that?
I don't know the exact number here on the number. The number of people we're working with here.
Including faculty, students, north of 20, 25 people at least that are involved directly in our projects.
So I will repeat that, 20, 25 people.
At TechSport Ventures, we have a company that's a little bit different than the corporate innovation example, but we've got a company that PhD, an advanced degree student here at Georgia Tech, PhD student at Georgia Tech, was working on research sponsored by a company and sponsored by National Science Foundation. And we took that technology and that student helped him form that and found a company based on that technology. It's a 3D scanning, 3D imaging technology where we're able to create accurate 3D models from video. And so that was an example of research being sponsored by both corporations and the National Science Foundation that turned into and emerged into a company. And so today we teamed up that advanced degree student with another entrepreneur and off to the races, and they're part of ATDC's signature program now, when TiVo is the company.
I just want to add one thing to that. It's, we all talk about innovation and we all want the next greatest thing. It's not always, though, about that. And the one interesting story I'll tell you about what we did is we had a business need on a product that we needed to innovate into our products. We make the connected unit that goes in the vehicle. So we had a need to integrate Apple and Google into that. CarPlay and auto product. And we had to look across our portfolio where we had the resources available to do that. And it wound up based on both bandwidth and capability that this was the ideal place. So even though it wasn't a pure innovation, it was a leveraged need that the company had with the assets that we were able to bring together rapidly, and it fit just perfectly. So it's not always about just ground up innovation, it's about how we flex those resources that we develop and have access to. So that was really a positive story as it relates to helping the overall business, not only on an innovation standpoint, but on existing business that we have in the
Excellent, thanks.
Sorry. So President Peterson, you mentioned now that there's so many innovation centers that are actually starting to work together on projects, but these companies do very different things. So could you give us an example of some of the ways they're working together?
ThyssenKrupp is partnering with Southern Company. ThyssenKrupp is partnering with Southern Company to look at the energy consumption of elevators and to try to help with maintenance scheduling. We're seeing Home Depot working with the Home Depot company working with AT&T Mobility on internet retail, and not just putting a catalog online, but a virtual handyman, if you will, where you can take a picture of what your issue is. The floor outlet is the example I use. I talked to the board of directors, Frank Blake, and I even talked to the board of directors before they about starting an innovation center. He said, "Do you shop at Home Depot?" Well, if you're talking to the board of directors at the Home Depot, the right answer is yes, but I actually do. And I said, I went in, I had a floor outlet, and it had one plug in it, and I wanted to put two, and I took it apart and went to the Home Depot and showed it to the guy in the orange apron, and he said, yeah, come to aisle 14, this is what you need. And he got me the parts I needed and kind of told me what I needed to do, and they're trying to do that virtually. So we're seeing a lot of that integration. We started a process now, I don't know how long ago, it was several months ago, maybe 6 or 8 months ago now, where the leadership from these innovation centers comes together on a fairly regular basis and shares ideas about how they're interacting with Georgia Tech, and that has led to a lot of interactions. These gentlemen may have better examples of how they're working with some of the other innovation centers. Like that.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think we see from the startups and that there's, having all these innovation centers located here and attracting other companies here has made it great. So we're able to take our startups into these companies. We're able to have access to them in a way that we wouldn't, if I had to go try to meet Jeff out in the marketplace. That's much harder to do. And by having several of these early adopters working together, you get all sorts of benefits. So, ATDC is helpful in that. And so a good example of that process at ATDC, they have this Industry Connect program. And so we've got companies like User IQ downstairs that benefit when they bring these companies in together. They help coach the startups to be put in front of these companies, help prepare them ahead of time with what kind of needs they're looking for. And then I think vice versa as well. They help manage the expectations with the larger companies and help pick appropriate first engagements for some of the reasons these guys were talking about earlier to pull those together.
I would add that collaboration happens at another level as well. Just sharing best practices about innovation processes is very valuable. So you have dozens and dozens of companies here that are all trying to learn how to innovate, and there's a process. There's talent. There's budgeting. There's facilities. There's so many elements that create the successful model for innovation, and being in an ecosystem where there a lot of other companies trying to do it well, you can learn from each other and share just best practices.
Yeah, and sometimes it's as simple as just networking, being in the right place, right? Bud talked about an elevator company, and an elevator company and an automotive company have little in common, you would think, except this whole idea of connectivity and being connected in an elevator with a display that's actually sending information is very similar to now what's going to be sent through into a vehicle rear seat or in a rideshare vehicle where you start to actually send information. So we never would have thought that connection would make sense, and on our own we would not have gone forward to try to make the connection between an elevator company and an auto company, but it just happens.
They're both moving people.
There you go.
One other great example here is I chair the startup ecosystem group for CEDIG, which is the Center for Development and Application of Internet of Things here at Georgia Tech, and that brings together dozens of large companies to share best practices and the thought leadership around IoT, and it's been great to connect them with the early stage and innovation activity here in the startup community and watch the ideas that come out of it. And exactly what these guys are saying is, when you've got executives from multiple companies with multiple vantage points across multiple markets, and they connect with an entrepreneur that doesn't have that kind of visibility or access, it's all kinds of interesting opportunities come up, and that's one of the most beneficial things you can do for the startups, right? It helps them more quickly connect with those market opportunities, find out where they're on the right track, find out where they're on the wrong track. But that scale of bringing together all those companies, doing it together, is really unique.
Excellent.
I was wondering if, I have a very simple question, if you could define what an innovation center is.
Well, I'll start. And I probably won't remember them all, but we have 7 characteristics that we think are required to have effective innovation. And so one of them is the facility itself, a facility that's conducive to collaboration and ideation. I think everybody knows the higher the ceilings, the bigger the writing space, the bigger the ideas. So you need to create a facility that generates great ideas and facilitates good collaboration. Second, you need talent, right? Diversification of talent that can come in and challenge ideas, bring different perspectives. Third, you need a process. You know, I have to admit, when I first opened up the facility, I thought, well, great, we'll just kind of put out our shingle and invite some creative people in, and we'll start innovating. But you can spin your wheels a lot, spend a lot of money on things that don't produce anything. So it's important to have a well thought through process for innovation that gates and puts criteria in place for ideas to continue forward. Fourth, you need funding. Not a lot. I think some people think you need an awful lot of money to make these innovations work. But frankly, there's a reality that sometimes less resource can drive greater creativity, and so you do need some funding to keep the lights on, but not necessarily an overabundance of money where people are thinking, maybe in the wrong way and not thinking about doing something creative with resources. And I'm running out now because I haven't thought ahead of time about what all 7 characteristics are. I'm going to look at David for a minute if he's in the room to bail me out here a little bit on.
Yeah, I think you got most of them. Multidisciplinary team is important. And the process you cover in place, those are the key elements when funding.
Yeah, I think the other one I was thinking was distance from corporate office, but the right level of executive sponsorship. So you've got your backing from a large company that keeps it sponsored and supported, but the freedom to fail in a separate environment.
Yeah, so an innovation center, the definition, I first start off with the definition for innovation, and there's so many good ones out there, but I love Google's definition of innovation. It's new, surprising, and radically useful. And so if we believe in that definition, then what is the environment that allows that to take place? In an innovation center, it goes beyond internal. It brings in the external for that to take place. And so it's a very simple definition, but one that we look to.
Excellent.
Yeah, the only thing I would add to that, I think Jeff makes a great point about the external piece of that. You can build an innovation internally in your headquarters, where your headquarters is, but what you don't have then is that ability to partner with an ecosystem that exists. And I think for technology and innovation moving forward, it's all about this creative partnering in order to drive innovation to a much higher level, where you couldn't do that in an isolated environment on your own campus.
From the other side, one thing I would add, watching the companies interact with the corporate innovation centers, is it kind of de-risks that engagement for the startup, right? They don't know how to go through a typical sales, procurement process and everything else. And so these corporate innovation centers, in most cases, I thought your 7 characteristics were fantastic. And part of what that does is it creates a different interface to that company than they would otherwise have if they tried to engage that company through other channels. And so that's a big component of a successful innovation center.
On here, innovation center is still sometimes hard for me to understand on the most basic level what you're doing in your innovation center. So I know part of it is behind closed doors, but is there anything? And I know it's your first day here, but is there anything that you can share that's come out of your innovation center so far that has been really cool?
I'll start. I think it's important to frame the process. So remember, the process of innovation is to take ideas, and so we crowdsource ideas by the hundreds, and then those ideas get voted upon by peers who ultimately then, the ideas with the most support rise to the top. So then those ideas kind of, at that point, come into the innovation center, and that's where we shape the idea. So, you want to transform the way a patient does something. Well, let's talk about that. So you start shaping the idea and getting a sense for what this thing really could do and how it would be different from the way we do things today. And from that shaping phase, you then take it into some kind of a design phase where you're actually going to design some sort of solution, maybe prototype that solution so you can show it to people and say, look, particularly sponsors that might have to put some money behind it to take it to a fully developed product. And then from a prototype stage to a pilot stage where you actually put it on the market and try it, and then finally, a full-scale rollout of a capability. So when we talk about the innovation and innovation, we're talking about something that makes it through various stages of evolution to both refine the product itself and then what we call the business case behind the product, the cost to create it and the value of deploying it. As far as just broadly, just real quick for a minute, some of the innovations we've created, I mentioned the personalized dynamic generated video. We're doing, interesting things with mobile, so that, healthcare isn't so complicated. The more we can simplify it on a mobile device, whether it's, access to your, to your providers, where your doctor or hospital is, be able to search for shopping for the cost of care, having access to your enrollment cards on your phone, and anything we can put into mobile is a place we're investing pretty heavily. Changing the benefits, the explanation of benefits reports that go out to patients is a big deal. There's a lot of legal guidelines over what has to be, included on all those communications, but just looking creatively at how to meet the legal guidelines but make much more user-friendly communications is another place we're working.
So I'm going to kick it back to Jen in just a minute, but I think it's a little easier for me to think of what an innovation center is not. And I think when you say an innovation center, a lot of people think you've got some smart people that are sitting around creating, just thinking up ideas. And I think what it is, it's a lot of interaction. We have a huge number of programs. I don't know how many programs, maybe as many as 20 programs within the Enterprise Innovation Institute kind of framework. ATDC has in the neighborhood of 40 companies that are startup companies that are progressing well. The student competitions, the Create X, which is a summer program where students have an idea for a company. A lot of times those ideas haven't really been fleshed out. They have an idea, but that idea may go this way when it really needs to go this way. So Jen, I think maybe you could talk about the access to some of the programs that we have in ATDC and the access the innovation centers have to those.
Sure. So we've been working with quite a few of the innovation centers to talk about how could we take our startup methodology that revolves around lean startup and experiential entrepreneurship and take a look at their innovation processes and see where we might be able to interject some of those classes, workshops, coaching and mentoring from our experienced entrepreneurs into the actual corporate innovation cycle. And so we've seen some early successes with that. It's still very early in it. I will say that Tom's definition of his innovation cycle sounds a lot like a hackathon to me, like a very large hackathon and lengthy hackathon, but that's sort of what we do. Part of what we do at ATDC is run hackathons once a quarter, and the idea is to bring great, talented people together. Again, we suss out 100 ideas on a Friday night and form teams around them. In this case, we're not looking for necessarily stakeholders, but we're looking for the folks on the team to rally around that idea, narrow it down to about 15 ideas, and work on that for the rest of the weekend. Right? And there's actually one here at Georgia Tech this weekend, happens to be Hack GT. So there'll be probably one of the largest hackathons in Georgia, probably in the entire Southeast this weekend here at Georgia Tech, with over 1,000 students participating. So it's a lot of innovation, ideation, things like that.
I might describe what a hackathon is.
Yeah, so hackathon is really, it's about talent. So it's a lot about the innovation centers. We need to distribute it, like lots of diverse talent, right? We need designers, idea people, and we need coders. And what we're trying, my goal in running a hackathon is always to see if we can bring together a magic combination of those people that are going to decide to actually move the idea beyond the weekend. But people pitch business ideas on the Friday night of the hackathon. We go through a team formation process. We'll hear about 100 ideas on any given Friday night. That 100 and so people then form 10 to 15 teams, and they literally work on the project all weekend. At the hackathons that we run, we do require customer discovery, so that does mean sometime on Saturday the teams are going out of the office, so to speak, to go talk to customers. and validate whether or not this idea has legs. Then they come back and they literally see how far they can get with building a prototype and building a business case over the course of 54 hours. On Sunday night, there's a presentation with judges. Blake's been a judge a number of times, and some of our corporate partners have been judges as well. And we identify the winners, usually top 1, 2, and 3 place, as to how far they got, how great a job they did at customer discovery, and how strong we feel about the validity of the business model. What we hope is that 6 months later, 1 to 3 of these project teams decide to form a company and form a startup. And I can give you an example. Recent graduate Synapio, who graduated from the ATDC Signature program last year, started at a startup weekend, and current ATDC Signature company Florence Healthcare actually started at one of these hackathons. So on occasion it does work.
So Jen, you left that one important component,
Yes.
caffeine.
Lots of pizza, lots of caffeine, yes.
At this point, President Peterson, you probably have a lot of companies coming to you wanting to set up an innovation center here. When they come to you, how do you know that they're going to be a good fit with what y'all are trying to create here?
Actually, they don't come to me very often. They come to Jen and to Chris Downing and to other people, and they're the folks that can determine whether it's a good fit. I have some interaction with folks and show some people around the center. I think that we take groups from different companies through the ATDC, through this facility, the one next door, and just kind of show them what's going on. It's really up to them to determine if there's going to be a good fit. I think we're at an interesting point right now because we've got, and it depends on how you count and what spaces you count, but somewhere in the order of 15 to 18 of these innovation centers that exist in this area. But there aren't two that are necessarily competitors. There's some overlap, but not a lot. So we've got, healthcare, we've got Panasonic Automotive, we've got AT&T. So they're kind of different areas. It'll be interesting to see as we get more and more companies, and we start to get 2 companies that operate in a very similar space, how that kind of works. But I think it's really up to the companies to determine if it's a good fit, and there's so much variation in the way that companies interact. Some companies use a lot of co-ops, some use interns, some work with graduate students primarily. So I'm not sure that there is a single model that describes all of them or even a significant number. Right?
Yeah, well, I think, and Tom's definition we covered as well. I think this, what strikes me is the level of commitment that the companies are making. And as you said, it's not just funding, right? Funding something for a big company is might feel painful inside a big company, but it's not the big thing. It's that they create an environment and how that funding can be used. Whether I was writing down as everybody here was talking about the key activities, right? Research and development, whether it's internal or external. Discovery, figuring out and seeing what else going on in the marketplace, what startups are doing, what other companies are doing, piloting projects, business development, all those activities. And so creating both the process and like I said, the funding that gives them the chance to pilot a project without that startup having to go through some typical procurement process. Creating, in the case of AT&T and the Foundry, right? It's not even just piloting it from a financial standpoint. It's de-risking it for their network, right? Is it going to work with their network? So yeah, so I think what makes a good fit are those companies that are making that commitment, both in funding and in people, to build those relationships, right? And spend time, and there's a reason that they're doing them around universities. You guys have all mentioned different, said in different ways, kind of the serendipity, these interactions that can't be scripted. And this discovery process that can't be scripted. That's all part of why these are happening beside a research university.
Okay, I do have a question from a reporter on the webcast. It is, while lots of universities say that they care about commercialization, few make it a priority. How has Georgia Tech incentivized this? And to our corporate panelists, what can more colleges do to I think President Peterson, to you first.
So one of the things that impressed me about Georgia Tech when I first arrived was how open they were with intellectual property. And there's a philosophy that has grown over the past 7 or 8 years, but existed prior to my arrival, that rather than try to focus on intellectual property and understand who's going to control the intellectual property, who's going to own it, I think our focus is on trying to help these new ideas and new companies be successful. I was at another institution where it just seemed to me, and I have several patents, it seems to me that we spent so much time with the lawyers arguing over who's going to own the intellectual property that may never even result. And so what we try to do is work very hard to make that process as smooth and as easy as possible. And I'll use Chris Klaus and Tom Noonan and ISS, Internet Securities. Chris was an undergraduate student at Georgia Tech, and he had an idea that he was working on in his dorm room for computer security process. If we had, and Georgia Tech and some of our alums connected with him and tried to connect him with Tom Noonan, who was I think maybe a super experienced older entrepreneur. He was 25. And they tried to connect them and did everything they could to try to help make that company successful. If Georgia Tech had forced Chris Klaus to try to figure out who owned the intellectual property, the company may very well have failed. And today we have the Klaus Advanced Computing Facility. And so the approach that we take is to try to do everything we can to help these companies be successful, as opposed to try to spend a lot of time worrying about who's going to perhaps owns the intellectual property that may or may not result from that.
Blake, you've been through this process. Or at least with some of your companies, you've taken intellectual property out of the university. Points to that.
Yeah, well, so we could spend the rest of the afternoon talking about it. I think a big one is, like Bud said, reducing the friction around that process of getting all those commercialization things out in the marketplace, and the licensing and IP is a big part of that. But I think also to his point, there's a broader focus on commercialization rates rather than just how many patents or whatever, and that that's being felt across campus and across by the faculty and staff, and even funding sources, right? That's starting to be a priority. Georgia Tech's one of, I think, the 2 original teaching schools for a program the National Science Foundation launched, ICOR, which is a program where they take the faculty and students through a process that we would normally take a startup through, right? A customer discovery, kind of a hackathon almost like experience, and they take them through that to get them focused earlier in their research on not necessarily commercializing and selling, but at least going out and finding out what are all the potential applications of this research or of this technology. So I think it's the climate here, but also I think that's a national trend, which is to focus on the increasing commercialization rates.
Just one more comment on that. I think one of the things that's interesting and attractive about this particular area here at Technology Square are all the components. There's a large, very good research university that has all the talent that's associated with it. There now are these corporate offices that have located here to access that. The Georgia Department of Economic Development is on the 12th floor. Then Greg King and his group work with the companies to try to help attract new companies, but also help the existing companies learn how to interact with the students and the new ideas they have and interact with each other. So there's this kind of various entities that have come together that have created just a kind of a structure that seems to work very well. I think if you sat down a few years ago and tried to figure it out, I'm not sure what you would have mapped out, but things have, again, the state economic development arm is having them here in Technology Square is enormously helpful, and then having people that on our team that can interface with those companies and the small startups and help make those connections as well.
So maybe I'll answer it by contrasting. We have an R&D facility at Innovation Center in Silicon Valley also. So what's the difference in Silicon Valley and here? And what is the contrast? So Silicon Valley, because of its success, has become enormously large and difficult to move through. Where today, here we have access and engagement that is simplified, all the way down to IP, as I think Bud said. You can move through these things in a much more rapid fashion than you can in the behemoth technology in Silicon Valley. And this allows that speed and flexibility and access. And one of the things I think is inherent in any area of innovation is a fast fail. So if you work off the premise of fast fail, but you can't go fast, it kind of defeats the whole purpose. So this is an environment that certainly engages and allows that. So I think access, engagement, and the simplification of how things move forward is really a differential here that is important.
Just following up on that, I mean, how do you prevent that from happening here? If there are too many innovation centers, and what would be too many?
Yeah, I think the reason that the thoughtfulness of involving the commercial aspect of this early on is different than what it was out there. It was primarily independent entrepreneurs with great ideas, driven by a few very creative companies. Where here, there's been an early engagement with, as Bud said, putting them, co-locating them, getting them close, giving them resources, giving them all of that. It's building from the bottom up. And we have the opportunity here to build it in a way that will allow that to happen naturally and have that engagement all the way up, where Silicon Valley grew a little bit differently over a longer period of time also.
Just another question. In terms of research and development, in your respective industries, like what are you seeing as the trend? Because it seems like a lot of companies are moving off research and development off their balance sheets, to make it look better. So are we seeing research and development move into like these innovation centers, or is there less funding going towards traditional research and development?
Yeah, I'll go for this. Thank you. So I think in pharma in particular, there has been a bias for years for internally homegrown research and development. And yet, you look at what's taken place over the last decade within biotech in particular. And so now you've seen this reach out over the last decade into the biotech world. But still, it was sort of siloed, right? You have companies focused on internal R, you have companies focused on acquisition, BD, on the biotech space. And I think we're into this new world where it is a combination of both. And that's the way we're trying to come about it. So we still invest heavily in internal research and development, especially in areas that are core to us, areas that we know very well. But yet we realize all the innovation that's taking place, either on the technology side, because I do believe we'll see a merger of molecular entities with technology, which would come from Silicon Valley, to looking at the Boston platform, which is biotech from a molecular entity perspective. And so our partnerships are broad, right? We have partnerships with Harvard, we have partnerships in Silicon Valley, and I think to be successful in the future, it has to be a combination of both, right? And serendipity is involved here as well, and so it's really about leveraging that network.
I would add that part of our innovation efforts are not to innovate internally, but to watch what's going on out in the industry. I think 4 years ago, there was something like $1 billion or a little over $1 billion being put into healthcare technology. Last year, that was $4.3 billion. That's a lot of money, and it's tens of thousands of startups and entities that have a new idea. And so, while we do have our internal efforts that are, working in an ecosystem, part of our job is just to scout what's happening out there day by day, week by week, to make sure that those breakthroughs that occur are, we're aware of them. So we're not reinventing, and obviously we're adopting where we can.
Excellent. I'm going to ask one more question, and I'm actually going to open it up to the audience for questions if you'd like, so get your questions ready. Each of you came into launching an innovation center here in Tech Square with some expectations. I'd like to ask you what your biggest surprise has been. No surprises, that's good. Right?
So I didn't launch an innovation center, but having sat in Jen's chair as interim head for a while of ATDC and now on the other side of the table investing in startups, I tell you, going into, as this process has emerged, it was inherently obvious to me that we needed to do a bunch of coaching and mentoring of the startups on how to interact successfully with these corporate innovation centers and with the big companies and with those executives. I think a big learning for me has been the effort that's necessary to put in the other direction too, right? And spending time with those executives in these big companies, helping understand their objectives, but then also helping them understand or see that these startups aren't always just small versions of great big companies, right? And trying to help them identify the appropriate way to engage with those startups, ways that are beneficial for both organizations that don't crush, and I think what's your word, that don't crush the startup. So I'd say that was sort of my biggest surprise going in, was I assumed that side was all buttoned up and that it was the startups that were that had the biggest knowledge gap.
Yeah, one of my favorite examples was an early Industry Connect event with CN2, Margaret Martin, CEO of that company, and she puts up a slide with her team of 6 people, and she's so thrilled to show that she has 6 people on her team, and the company's like, where are the rest of the people? Right? No, that is my team. Oh. Right, so that's fun.
Yeah, I would say that the surprises have been pleasant surprises. I remember when Greg King walked us through here when we were first looking at the facility, he talked about how things just happen. People just collaborate naturally, and I thought, right. Show us our space. Let's get our space, and we'll start doing our thing. And in my biggest interest was, how am I going to get all of Anthem across the whole United States to come here and ideate and create and do something great. And I thought, well, if it happens that we can innovate or collaborate a little better with some of the other players, so that's all good. But the main thing was to get our footprint down. And he was so right. I mean, I won't say without any effort, but it seems effortless. The level of collaboration between all aspects of the Synergy building, of the ATDC, of Georgia Tech, it's just been easy and fun and energizing.
Yeah, I would echo the same thing. Ease, surprisingly easy, surprisingly accessible, but the overwhelming one that has caught us a little off guard is the quality of the talent. So, coming from a different environment and coming from an automotive environment, we were quite secure about what level of talent we had and what we thought we had, until we really came down here and started to engage. The co-op program we started, as Bud said, we were the first guy here, and we had some modest plans initially, and we were going to scale it, but we didn't expect to scale it at 10x over 4 years. So we've scaled this program 10x over 4 years because we can't get enough of the talent, and the way the co-op program works, they're embedded next to our employees such that you don't know the difference between that employee, and they're not there supporting an engineer or somebody in this activity. They are doing, and they are doing very adequately, and to some extent far beyond what we would have expected 4 years ago when we came in.
No, I was surprised the key worked this morning. It was our first day. I was really excited. So I was able to get into the building. But I will say this. We've been working with Georgia Tech for quite some time, so now we have our space. But we have been working, startups, and I guess the thing that's so encouraging is the speed at which we're moving and how aligned that we are. And I think with other partnerships, with other entities, we have alignment, but the speed has not been there. And it's just very exciting to see how quickly that we're progressing. And our fingers are crossed that by being here, we'll be able to accelerate even more.
Excellent, thanks.
So I had probably the biggest surprise for me, although I had to start at a center, was we talk a lot about trying to build entrepreneurial confidence in our students and our faculty and our staff, but particularly in the students. I was in Texas for 20 years, at Texas A&M. And in Texas, I'd moved there from Kansas, but there was this term that they used in Texas, and it's called the dry hole mentality. Because you've got these people that go out, they're businessmen and women, and they go out and they drill a well, and nothing there. And they say, we'll just drill another one. So and they talk about this as a dry hole mentality. I actually like the term entrepreneurial confidence a little better than dry hole mentality. But the ability and the resiliency of the students and the people that are involved in these innovation centers, the resiliency of them to take an idea and watch that idea completely transform to a different application or maybe fail completely and then bounce back and try something else has been just nothing short of amazing for me.
Excellent. So I wanted to open it to the audience now. Any questions? Do not elaborate.
I'm Maryam Alavi, Dean at Scheller College of Business, and thank you for a very nice and informative and insightful panel. My question has to do with, we all understand issues around dynamics of innovation, particularly in form of structures, processes, and resources that an innovation center has and can make things happen. One of the challenges in organizations, particularly larger organizations, tends to be this idea of once an innovation takes place, to bring it to the organization and align it with what an organization does, short of spinning off a new business. And there's a certain level of ambidexterity that a firm needs to have to be able to do what they are currently doing and pays the bills and creates the revenues, and look into the future to be able to experiment and take risks and come up with these new ideas. So I've always wondered what kind of managerial and leadership innovations are needed for established, successful large organizations to be able this ambidextrous capability on part of their leaders and managers. So if you have any ideas or comments, I appreciate hearing that.
I'll start. I won't complete all of it. I'm sure I want to leave plenty of room here for my colleagues to finish that. The one thing we've acknowledged is that innovation happens on three fronts, if you will: incremental, differentiating, and transformative. And what we're finding is that the incremental ideas are easy to come by. They're usually a little easier to develop capabilities around, and the business is more adaptive to those capabilities. So it's not that hard to get your business units to allocate the resources to deploy an incremental capability because they can immediately see the benefit. The next type is differentiating, and usually have kind of the same situation. It might cost a little more, it's a little riskier, takes a little more alignment to move those kind of capabilities forward. But again, because your P&Ls are typically, the business units are typically the groups that are having to make the change, make the investment, adopt the capability, they have to see that value. The hurdle comes in the transformative ideas. If you have some innovations that could truly transform your industry, transform your business, transform your business model, it may not be the institutional managers that are ready to adopt those transformative ideas. In fact, they may disintermediate some of the work that they're doing. So you have to have another channel to discuss those kind of ideas at the most senior levels of the company.
We have a little bit of an unfair advantage in the fact that the business and market is moving at a pace that no longer leaves an option to be able to not do this. So we're in the automotive space, we're in the connected automotive space. Just use Uber if you want to use the example. Everybody already knows it. It's the disruption that will create projects if you don't have an answer to it. And with that thought in mind, you inherently will build a paranoia in the management team that says, I have to be paying attention because this one came out of nowhere, right? The other one, which is a major partner that we have, is Tesla Motors. There's no automotive startup really that's existed in this industry for 30 years, and then one comes out of nowhere, and now there's all of these other ones that are coming out of nowhere. So I think we are an easy example for people to understand, but I think everybody here has examples that have happened now in the marketplace such that there's this inherent mindset that we have to pay attention, and you have to be innovating, and if you're not, you're going to get left behind, or you're going to be, you're going to have a short existence.
You know, from a leadership quality, I think it all begins with commitment. So we have to be committed to innovation. And I just think of the pharmaceutical industry, and due to the margins, there's been a number of innovative platforms that continue to fail because the margins continue to be good. So core continues to win. And so what happens is you have companies bolting on innovative platforms into the organization. And guess what? A product goes off patent, something happens, you're meeting with Wall Street on the next quarterly call, and everyone is looking about what they can do to save them. What do? They cleave off the bolted innovative platform. So there has to be a commitment and a belief that we have to innovate. And I think also there's this view that we put so much pressure on innovative ideas, go or no go, that many times kills these ideas. But do we apply that same pressure for our daily routines? It's what we know, it's what we believe. And I think the other thing from a leadership perspective is applying the same criteria for core for something that's new. Because I think we have at least in our industry, we have this belief of what we're doing is probably creating more value than it is.
Excellent. Any other questions from the audience? So we've talked a lot about how being here in Tech Square is good for business. The question is, what are the benefits for higher ed, and what can we learn as an institution from the innovation centers?
Well, I think certainly one of the benefits for us in higher ed is the type of environment, the presence of these innovation centers in a place like Technology Square creates. And you talked about it, Jen. You said you can walk out the door and you can almost feel the energy of the place. 10, 15 years ago, students, certainly 20 years ago, students came to places like Georgia Tech so they could go to work for one of these companies, large corporations, and that was kind of the end game. We see an increasingly large number of students that want to come, and instead of preparing for a job, they want to create their own job. We've got students that have started 2 companies before they graduate, and there's this mindset that I want to work for my own company, I want to work for myself, and being able to, I'll say market that, although I don't know how good a job you do of marketing, but that idea attracts a very interesting type of student to Georgia Tech. And again, the energy and the excitement that surrounds that through the Venture Prize or CreateX or Summer Startup, this idea that you can come here and you can start your own company and we'll help you figure it out, and we won't try to crush you or steal your IP, is something that is, the students today find very, very attractive.
I would add that, on the other the other end of the spectrum, with the large corporations being here, giving these students an opportunity to come in and work on real world problems, real world, big corporation kind of environments. So academic world meets big corporate world in a place where you can actually get something done pretty quickly. And so hopefully that's feeding back in through the internships and through the other projects and engagements back into the academic environment.
When you think about the startup and innovation activity, a lot of regions try to emulate Silicon Valley and other areas, and to try to recreate that environment. And a lot of that focus winds up on access to capital, raising more money. And I think what we've been talking about today is really that key, missing ingredient that they often overlook. It's that it is that opportunity, that engagement, that you see in tech hubs like Silicon Valley with those big tech companies and with the, with the startups, and that just, hard to articulate. But you've heard the examples from these companies today of of what the benefits are going both ways, right? And that market access, the ability to get those things to market, that can't happen without it. So, in the Southeast, in a place where, depending on what study you look at, only 3 or 4% of the nation's venture capital is invested in the Southeast, maybe 1% or so. Here in Georgia, there's a lot of focus on that, but that's what comes after you create this environment, this culture. So, I think what you're seeing here is something that's great for not just Georgia Tech, and certainly terrific for the companies, but much broader than that, right? It's really making this region, a hub, another emerging tech hub for that kind of activity.
So how do you measure success in your innovation centers? Will there be a time when an innovation center is no longer necessary and you can roll this function back into large corporation?
Yeah, there's the environment that's created here or in this setting is not possible to emulate back in our corporate setting, right? The mix, the demographic, the diversity, it's not possible. So in that respect, we can't bring it back. The other thing is the ability to drive this level of talent and have this much access to that talent in new spaces. For us, it's impossible to emulate because, as I said, connected mobility with this demographic isn't going to change, I don't think, generationally. So I don't think this is something that you can recreate in a corporate setting and be able to emulate the things that you can get by doing that in our specific.
I would add, kind of pragmatically, when we first started, we were measuring input variables, maybe throughput variables. How many ideas do we have? How many sessions are we running? How many people are coming? How many projects are in the pipeline? And now that we've been at it for about a couple of years, we're starting to measure the output variables. How many ideas are actually deployed? What kind of value are they creating? What's the return on that investment? And how broadly are they implemented across the enterprise?
So I think it'll be interesting to see what happens with WorldPay and NCR. So here are companies that moved the entire, or in the process of moving their entire business unit here in this particular space. WorldPay at Atlantic Station and NCR just 600 to 400 yards from here. And whether or not they try to create this type of environment within that space, or whether they want to do what AT&T did and not put it in the shadow of their large tower, but break out, separate it. So I think it'll be interesting to see how they start to interface with the talent here that exists in Technology Square. We've got NCR just announced they're bringing 5,000 more people to Midtown. And so how are those 5,000 people going to interact with this ecosystem that exists?
When you think about it, even the SQ5 and University House opening up last summer behind us significantly changed the atmosphere too, right? So, because now we have all those students living directly behind us, and they have to come running out down that path by the parking deck to get on the trolley every morning, right? And so they're back and forth all day long, and so that's really brought, even just that small change made a tremendous difference in the amount of energy and the collision factor, as I like to call it. Jeff, you were?
I was just going to say that I've never really looked at it about, or thinking about, okay, we've got our innovation hubs, and at some point would we bring them back in? And I know some companies do, and there's a large separation between home office and innovation centers. I can think of two I know where you have to get approval from the CEO if you're corporate to go visit the innovation center because they don't want to corrupt it or contaminate it. And so that might work for them. I think for us, and the way I view this, is this is who we want to be. And so I believe that we will be partnered and networked globally. And so I think by doing this, it will change our own DNA. So it's not about ever bringing it back in, it's about going out further. And there's no way that we can do what we want to do by just being inside our own walls. And so I think these partnerships changes our DNA back at the home office, and we become an extension of our external stakeholder engagement. And so I have no desire to sort of separate them. I think they grow together.
President Peterson, the last time I interviewed you, told me you were in talks with 3 more innovation centers that Georgia Tech was. Can you tell us now if we might be hearing any more announcements like these in the near future?
Yes. Yeah, there's, and again, Greg King is really kind of the key contact, although we have lots of people working with it. But when we have someone that expresses an interest, we put him in touch with Greg King, and he gets them connected with Jen, with Chris Downing, with some of the other folks that are here, their innovation centers, and just bring them in and show them what's going on. We have not had very many companies express an interest and come and then say, oh, that's not what we want. I mean, I don't know what Greg, our batting average is, but it's pretty high. And we're continually talking to other companies about different ways to engage with them, whether it's simply a master research agreement or physically located here in this area. So we're seeing more and more growth. Just saw 2 announcements. Anthem just opened their facility a month ago. I think time gets away from a couple months. But did the ribbon cutting here, and so we're seeing lots and lots of activity, and I think we'll continue to see that activity. That was one of the reasons that, quite honestly, that we purchased the Biltmore, because it allows us to expand what we're doing with ATDC. And when the High Performance Computing Center, 750,000 square feet, opens up, that will provide additional opportunities for other companies to come in and create innovation spaces.
Excellent. If there's no more questions, I'm actually going to wrap it up. Thank you so much for being here at ATDC. I would invite any of you that are interested to come to the 2nd floor and see the new ATDC. Renovations were complete in February. I'm really pleased to host you all here, and it's great to meet all of you that I haven't already met. And thank you so much for supporting our startups and being part of our ecosystem. With that, I'll turn it over to President Peterson for any last words you may want to say.
Well, I just thank the panel and thank for the folks in the audience. Again, we're very, very excited about this. When I came to Georgia Tech, I didn't come here and say, you know what, we're going to start this place in Technology Square. What I knew we couldn't do, and I think a couple of panelists talked about it, I knew we wouldn't be able to replicate Silicon Valley. In fact, I don't think anyone's ever going to be able to replicate that. The large corporations, Xerox, HP, that were out there, the timing, you think about that, that's 35 years old. But what we have done is taken advantage and benefited from the specific characteristics that we have at Georgia Tech, in Atlanta with the Fortune 500 companies, the number of Fortune 500 companies here, and found a way to kind of marriage that. But we're very excited about what's going on, and I'm very excited to see how it continues to grow and evolve, because I'm sure that in 5 years from now it'll look different than it does today. But I hope it retains this vibrancy, this energy, this innovative spirit, and that our students and faculty and staff are still able to interact with people in the way that they do. Thank you very much, all of you joining us.